NFL-wise, with the Browns getting the win over the Ravens this past week, 2-6. Look, I'm not going to lie. Last week, I thought that the Browns' playoff hopes are dead, and I don't want to overreact to a win over the Ravens, but mathematically, I mean, the Bengals are very much in the playoff hunt. They have one more win.
I saw it. What, Browns are at like 13%, 14% or something like that? It's still alive?
Like slightly shot up. You got the Chargers, and they play a lot of AFC teams coming up too, so that definitely helps. So, you beat the Chargers, and I do believe that their season's, and I say this every week, I always fall for this stuff, but the Chargers game for the Browns, like if they win that, I think that they're keeping that roster intact and moving forward to compete. I think if they lose that game, I think Zadarius Smith is gone and they move on from quite a few of those pieces. But it is, I didn't really consider the Browns back in that playoff conversation until you start looking at when the Colts lost, the Dolphins lost. Obviously, the Bengals going down helped open that door a little bit. The Jets are no longer, I think, even a threat at this point. So the door opened for Cleveland with that win over Baltimore on Sunday, and the Bengals dropped to 3-5. So you start to look at this. The Bengals still, though, have a lot of games that they are going to be favored to win and should win moving forward. And the Browns similarly have some games that when you get that type of quarterback play, will be in position to win as well. But at the end of the day, they're going to be battling each other for one of those final playoff spots, but also battling each other for the last place spot in the AFC North. Which is more likely, the Browns or the Bengals, to finish in last in the AFC North?
Woo! I mean, I'm going to say it's more likely that the Browns finish last just because I think both teams are pretty bad right now, and I would lean towards Joe Burrow getting you more wins than Jameis Winston, but I think it could come down to the head-to-head game. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch to say that we beat the Browns in Cleveland. The Browns will come here later in the season. It might come down to that matchup for who finishes last in the division. I don't think either of these teams are going to make the playoffs. I don't think either of these teams are very good. It's really, really sad that we're having this conversation because both fan bases thought that this was a chance of a year that their team could actually compete coming into the season. The Browns fans and Bengals fans alike thought they could compete this year, and nope. Big fat no for both of them.
It's close. I mean, it's close. I think it just comes down to schedule, and I think the Bengals have the easier schedule remaining. And it just honestly depends what you think of the Bengals as a good or bad team. Do you think the Bengals are good or do you think they're bad? Because the Browns will travel to Cincinnati on December 19th. I'm not going to sit here and count that as a win as a Bengals fan. I think we probably look at each other like those two teams. Like I guess I could ask you, do you think the Bengals are good? Because I don't think the Browns are good. I think the Browns have Jameis Winston and they're better, but I still think they're a bad team. As an outside person, do you look at the Bengals and say I'm scared of that game?
Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase will always pick them over anyone that they're fighting for those final spots. But when you just take that out of the equation, Cincinnati's not playing good. Do I think they're good? Yes, they're not playing good. I think the offense is playing bad. I think that offense is good. I don't know what's going on. 3 straight weeks of that. Now, you could say they've played good defenses, but that's also a problem because guess what happens when you make the playoffs? You face good defenses. So that's kind of a problem that, okay, we can only beat up on the bad teams, but we can't function offensively against good teams. I think that, or at least good defenses, I think that's a concern. I actually, not being a homer, Cleveland, I don't think they're as bad as people think. They got the full offensive line back.
They don't have a wide receiver.
I think Cedric Tillman's the guy.
He's okay as of right now, but we don't know what he is yet.
But I think there's a lot of teams who are contending that don't have wide receivers. But I think Tillman is. I think we saw in the way that they ran that offense last week. I mean, everyone ate. He passed the ball around. It wasn't just locking in on one guy. I think that Nick Chubb being back, David Njoku back, and then the one most important factor, so the Bengals offense is why I lean them. But then the Browns defense with complementary offense, I want to pick them. But then you throw in the factor of the Bengals schedule. There's a lot of moving parts.
Bengals have 4 more teams in the schedule with a sub-500 record. The Browns only have 2.
And, I look at the Chargers game. That's why I think it comes down to this week. If the Browns win, and I'm going to pick them to win, I think that right now what we saw last week is what we saw with Joe Flacco last year, that this team can air it out. It's complemented by the run game, and then the defense has to go out and do its thing, of course. But they beat the Chargers, and they should beat the Saints in the next 2 weeks. And now all of a sudden you go 2-6. Now you're 3-6, 4-6, and it's a completely different ball game. And then Pittsburgh, that's going to be the real test. Cleveland has 6 losses. I think you have 2 more on the schedule. You can afford 2 more losses. The problem is you don't want 7 losses heading into November. Yeah. If you have 7 and 6 losses heading into November too, That makes it very unlikely. But they do have 2 losses to work with. You still have 2 with Pittsburgh. You have another with Cincinnati. You have Kansas City and another with Baltimore. It's unlikely. But the question is, which is more likely to finish in last? I guess just because the way that they shot themselves in the foot, a 1-6 start, I have to say Cleveland's more likely to finish in last. But, man, Cincinnati would have been an easy one to pick Cleveland, but with their offense looking the way it has with the defensive problems the last 3 games, it's tough for me to feel confident even going up against bad teams for the Bengals at this point. So, again, these 2 teams are battling it for last for a reason.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons on both. I just don't think Cleveland's as bad as I know you think they're. I don't see it. That offensive line, a lot of their problems early. Yes, that's why. And again, I'm not interested in getting in the shouting match back and forth.
No, I don't. No, the shouting matches are over now that the evil man is gone.
The bad man.
I text you. I like Jameis Winston. I'm not going to root against the Jameis Winston Browns. They're 2-6. I'm not exactly like it doesn't benefit me to just say I want them to lose out. It would be funny, but it would I have no interest in that. I want to see Jameis Winston perform well. Obviously not against the Bengals, but against everybody else, I'm fine with.
He'll make his post-game interviews if he wins, so he has to keep winning.
Correct. I'm just saying that the Browns roster, as of this moment, isn't good enough to come back from 2-6, which means they're not a good enough team. They're a fine team. And they're certainly better. I think they're significantly better than they were 4 weeks ago with Deshaun Watson, 100%. And they're gonna upset a bunch of these teams. They're not gonna. I bet they finish with 8 wins, 7 or 8 wins is what I have the Browns finishing. I think the Bengals still finish with 8 or 9. I think the Bengals are just one game better just because of that easier schedule. That's all. And I think the Bengals have the 2 better players, being Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, as you mentioned, on the offensive side of the football.
Fair enough.
Defense is a joke, but.
Man, you go to Deshaun, or you go to Jameis 2 weeks earlier, and this.
Oh, if you go to Jameis 2 weeks earlier, I'm picking the Browns to finish above the Bengals,
and even 1 week earlier, because not just the additional win, but the win over Cincinnati.
Yeah.
In this,
they threw their season. The Cleveland Browns threw their season away. 1,000,000%. They intentionally and willingly said, you know what, we're going to go with the least amount of wins possible this season. That's what we're going to do when we play Deshaun Watson. You have an option that's going to win you football games. You have an option that's going to lose you football games. We're going with the loser.
I'll give them credit. For a while, I thought they picked the worst quarterback on their roster to start. DTR might be worse. So at least they didn't start the worst quarterback for the first few weeks. But if you would have started Winston, if Winston would have been backing up Deshaun against the Bengals, that's no doubt in my mind that's a win for the Browns.
Yeah, DTR was not. And I get everyone's like, well, you have to see what you have with him. Cool. Start him fresh in a game. Don't throw him out at halftime in a game. Like that just – no. But, again, Jameis has been named the starter for the rest of the season.
That's great, yeah.
Well, I mean, you lose to the Chargers, though. Let's say you lose – if the Browns lose to the Chargers and Jameis plays well in that game, would it be kind of dumb not to dangle him out there to see if you can get a 3rd rounder or 4th rounder for him, right? Like, what do you do for Cleveland in that situation?
If Jameis beats the Chargers, I might not play him the rest of the year. I mean, you have to try to trade him. Winning games is not a good thing for the Browns right now.
Oh, I think it is.
You do?
I think when you – here's why. You guys talk a lot about the Joe Burrow window. Well, the window in Cleveland right now is closing more and more, and that window is Myles Garrett. You have Myles Garrett and you have Nick Chubb.
But if you could get to the playoffs and make some noise, then maybe. But I don't think you can get in. So you would just be playing for pride and spoiler.
But if you win this week, look at the teams ahead of them, though. I think we're so caught up on the 2 wins. But look what's ahead. Everyone that they're battling out for the playoffs, they're a game behind. They're a game behind the Bengals. They're a game behind, or 2 games, let's just say.
Yeah.
But they closed that gap. I think right now that's why it was so crucial this past weekend when the Dolphins lost, when the Jets lost, when the Bengals lost, when the Colts lost. All of those teams could have gone up 3 games with the win over Cleveland, and I'd be all in on just moving on from every piece possible. But they opened that door with Cleveland's win over Baltimore. You get another win this weekend. It's a completely different outlook.
You'd have to go 7-8-1.
Don't get me wrong, it would be difficult, but 9 teams in the AFC right now are 500 or worse, and there's only one 500 team. So I'm not gonna rule it out. Now he's speaking as a fan. Obviously, it's a little bit different. I think if you were the front office and you're trying to get draft capital back to try and save or revive or maybe start a new direction with the franchise, right? I think at that point, and it was clear that they wanted to do that anyway when you saw Deshaun Watson stink up the field for 6 games. But yeah, at this point, they're not out of the playoffs. If they win 2 in a row, they're more than fine.
And here's the other thing.
I'm pretty comfortable saying the Browns are out of the playoffs.
They're a game behind your team.
I said the Bengals are out of the playoffs.
And I think so. Okay.
I'm not wishy-washy.
I do want to argue today with anyone. I'm not in the mood today.
I'm just
I promise.
saying, Bengals are also eliminated.
Wow, you're out on Cincinnati as a whole. They're not.
Bengals are not making the playoffs. 0%.
Who's better? Who are you confident in filling those final spots then?
In the AFC, I think the Chargers are a playoff team.
Okay,
that's what's worrying me about this week. I want to count them out, but they pissed me off with that win this past week.
I think the Chargers are a playoff team. I think the Steelers are a playoff team.
I agree.
And then I would honestly probably pick the Colts to figure it out.
I don't think
Anthony Richardson. If you watch Anthony Richardson's tape, it looks much better than that box score. He's gonna be. He's a good player. I still have faith in him.
The last point on this too, the other reason I don't see them moving on from you need a quarterback.
That's true.
And you could still draft one, yes, but at the same time, I think for one, I do believe that Tillman emerging the last 2 weeks is key. If Tillman has another huge game against the Chargers this weekend, now I think Cleveland has a new identity. It's Jameis with Tillman as the number 1, with Jerry Jeudy as the 2, and then, of course, Nick Chubb and David Njoku. And I think you go to war with that. And I think you do everything you can because I don't think it's just about getting hot for the rest of this season. I think that's your team next year, too. I think Cleveland comes back with this full roster for one more full year. Myles Garrett's going nowhere. They've come out and said that already. To me, if it sounds like they're moving on from Myles Garrett, yeah, you blow it up at that point. I'm surprised at how down on the Bengals you are. I get that they're coming off that loss against the Eagles. I'm just surprised you've checked out on them as much as you have.
I look at the schedule and I just don't see any better than 8 or 9 wins, and I don't think either of those get you in.
9 wins. There will be a 9-win.
A 9-win playoff team, absolutely. Not for a team like the Bengals with 3 conference losses already. No shot. You won't have the tiebreakers. Bengals have to win 10.
All right, Casey, what about
Maybe
you?
He wants to beat the Chargers.
Are you as out on the Bengals playoff chances as these guys are, or not really these guys, but Jacob?
I'm not as out because when I look at the playoff and I look at the conference record for the teams that are wild card teams, they all have 2 or 3 losses as well. So I mean, they're right there with the Bengals in terms of conference losses. Now they can't afford to lose an AFC game, period. But I mean, we were already in that boat anyways to begin with. If that team wants to make it to the playoffs, so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's doable. I just don't think it's. I think it's doable. I think it's possible. I just think that they have to win against the Broncos. They have to beat the Chargers. They have to beat the Ravens at least once. You got to beat Pittsburgh at least once or twice. You can't lose to the Browns. Like there's just like games you can't afford to lose. Otherwise, you will drop. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Bengals. Luckily for them, like a lot of these teams all play each other. Colts will play, I think, Denver and the Chargers. I think we play, of course, Denver and the Chargers as well. Excuse me. So there's a lot of overlapping games that we can afford, that we can make up ground and also push them down the board as well. So I'm not so out on the Bengals playoff chances as those guys are. I'm not
out on the Bengals playoff chances. It's just you're asked, like, the next 4 games, you have to win those games. You have to win all of them. That's where the disconnect is, and I don't think they can win all of them. I don't think they've shown this season that they're capable of winning 4 games in a row. I have not seen anything close to that. So I think they'll beat the Raiders. I think they'll go to Baltimore and they'll lose. I think they'll have a chance against the Chargers. I mean that defense. Yeah, that's
a game that you have to win.
The crazy thing with me being out on the Bengals playoff chances is I think they're going to beat Baltimore on Thursday night.
Do you?
Yeah.
So if they do that, they win those 2 games. You get back to 500.
Ran out of the gym by the Chargers.
Okay. Then Steelers at home.
Loss.
Then it's over at that point.
That's it, right. And that's where I'm at. I think they're going to win these next 2 games, and I'm going to be sitting here after that Thursday night win against the Ravens. I'm going to be all the way back in. God, all the way back in at 5-5.
So much of the Reds.
I know.
I'm getting July vibes.
It's the same thing over and over. And the only reason the Bengals have a chance is because the rest of the AFC sucks. Time is a flat circle of pain and suffering.
It's like a circle.
Kinner, I just want my teams to be good at some point. It's all I want.
And you know what I want? Here's what I want. I want my team to be good while your team is bad. That's what I want.
Okay. that's not
I
too
think
much
you
to
wanted
ask
the
for.
same thing. And you got to, like, your team beat my team last week, but it's like you didn't really get to relish in it too long because it didn't look good, and then you lose this. No one's happy.
No one's happy.
I can't be happy. You can't be happy.
No one's happy.
No one's happy. That's why we've been yelling a lot the last couple
That's
weeks.
right.
You know?
Jacob, do you take a little bit of responsibility saying that before the year they could start 0-6 and then they got as close to that as
still
possible?
I take no responsibility because that's not what I said.
Yeah, this is what you said.
Because we can go back and the three.
You did say
You did
0-6.
say that.
I said an 0-6 start wouldn't have me out on the team, which is true because after
Yes,
one and
but he's
after
out.
1 and 5, I was still in.
0-6, he's not out. But 3 and 5,
1
we're
and 4,
done.
I was still in. 3 and 5, I'm out.
And that
See?
science.
See, it's just math.